What is your best Dungeons and Dragons story? Part 2. If you have missed part 1, I will leave a link in the description, but they are in no particular order. My party of 5 was exploring this abandoned, underground city. Eventually we came to be chased by a horde of goblins. Too many to fight. Think like 40-50 enemies. Almost a small army. We had found a ladder and we're escaping along the rooftops. We came to a point where we had to roll acrobatics check to proceed. Myself and another member of our party, wearing heavy armor, miserably failed our checks. So now the party was split with 3 running across roofs and 2 of us running through the streets, after picking ourselves off the ground and tallying fall damage on our character sheets. We continue our run through the abandoned city with prompts from the game master of whether we wanted to go right, left, straight at intersections, turn down alleyways, etc. Eventually I ask the game master where we are and if we're still being chased. He informs us that we still hear some commotion in the distance, although it is further away than before, and we appear to be in some financial district. Now the smart move is to keep running, since we appear to be losing our pursuers. But this is DnD, so clearly, we didn't go with the smart move. Me. Financial district with like banks. Game master. Yeah, sure, I guess. Me. I search the abandoned banks for a vault. Game master. You're being chased by a small army, and you want to rob this place. Me. It's not robbery, it's abandoned. So eventually we find a bank vault after some in-game time. The vault is filled with coins which we stuff our bags with. As we're about to leave, the game master informs us that due to the time we wasted, we can now hear this horde just outside. So we need to roll stealth rolls to stay hidden and alive. Now since we were both wearing heavy armor, we both had -8 or so modifiers to stealth rolls. My buddy rolls first and gets a nat 18, so a 10. Okay, so maybe if this horde is deaf, we'll make it. Right, I'm up. Die rolls. And it's a natural 1. We both rolled new characters that night. TL. DR idiots try to stealthily loot an abandoned bank while wearing heavy armor and being chased by a small army. The time our gnome paladin hooked up with a non-player character. Because they impressed each other in battle. The setup. We arrive in a town escorting 3 non-player characters, the only survivors after their village was sacked by orcs. The townsfolk are suspicious of us, a dragonborn, a dwarf, a gnome, and a tiefling in disguise in a town of vanilla humans, but the villagers vouch for us, and we hole up for the night in the church. The next day, a watchman comes running into town with a dire pronouncement: more orcs are heading this way. Our team suits up and we help the townsfolk hide and the city guards prepare for battle. It's the 4 of us, 4 guards, 2 of the villagers we escorted, and the mayor versus 4 orcs, 1 orog, and an orc-eyed gruumsh. Now, Viola, the gnome paladin, is very proud of her 5 javelins, and is thrilled to discover that one of the guards is also a javelin user. As he runs past Viola into the heat of battle, she calls after him, "Wait, what's your name?" At which point the dungeon master, who had been naming all the NPCs up to this point, sheepishly a dungeon master it's, "I forgot." We all have a laugh and we're ribbing the guard the dungeon master a bit. "Nice to meet you, I forgot." But despite this, Mr. Javelin Guard more than distinguishes himself in battle by scoring not 1, but 2 critical hits with his javelins. We immediately nickname him Crit. Viola swoons, but keeps her head in the game and scores a critical hit of her own. This does not escape Crit. The battle is won, the loot collected, the plot thickened. We all agree that it's time to take a long rest. Me. Is Viola going to be spending her long rest with Crit? Tiefling, that depends. You're only allowed an hour of light activity. Is that going to be a problem, Viola? Dungeon Master. Crit comes over to your group. He hands Viola one of his javelins, into which he has carved his address. He also introduces himself. His name is I forgot, me. Are you saying he? Critical hit on her. And that's how it came to be that our gnome paladin may or may not have begun a long distance interracial relationship. It's complicated, she says. But I have a feeling we'll be seeing Mr. Got again. Bormy, a YouTuber who plays a ton of Dota 2, had a nice story about his Pathfinder session. Basically, he and his friends are all pirates, with their own ship, doing pirate things, etc. While traveling, suddenly parts of the ocean freeze over, especially around the ship, and zombies and frost wights appear. Frost wights being creatures that make you take cold damage when you touch or attack them, or when they attack you. Bormy is a Malay guy with no ranged attacks whatsoever, so he does the only thing he can do from the ship, and decides to fire the cannons. Rolling a natural 20, he decapitates one of the frost wights with a cannonball. As it's a zombie, the head is still alive, cursing as it lies there while the body walks around aimlessly. Then, he gets an idea. He retrieves the head, and mounts it on his quarterstaff through the neck hole. He's now walking around with what's basically a talking and cursing hammer that can freeze things and that deals blunt damage as well as frost damage. We had a half drow in the party who didn't always think things through. He started off as chaotic good, I think, and managed to give himself an alignment hit for murdering some prisoners who were chained up and sleeping, then another one for kicking a person who I'd already knocked out in a wizard fight club. And then later on in the campaign, we found a drow-killing elven sword and he wanted to give it to some elves thinking they'd be grateful that he returned it and not kill him. One game day when he was absent, the rest of us sold it so he wouldn't get his dumbass murdered by elves. A few months later, we bought him an ice cream cake in real life that said sorry we sold your sword on it. It starts with a countess. They meet with her and my players ask how hot she is. I say it doesn't matter, but they press me. Out of 10 I roll a d10 and get a 3. As we are talking, the bard is visibly contesting a thought and rolls a d20. It was a natural 20, automatic success. I don't see it, but the fighter doesn't calls him out on it. It went something like, "Fighter, I saw that bard." Bard. What? Fighter, that roll. That was a proposal roll. Bard. Well, it was a diplomacy check technically. Fighter. Dungeon Master. He rolled it. You've got to count it. Dungeon Master. A. Minotaur Barbarian. Count it. Count it. Dungeon Master. You want me to count it, Bard? Bard. Why not? I rolled the Countess's diplomacy roll in return. Natural 1. Automatic failure. My players hoot and get psyched. I tell the Bard to confirm the roll. Roll again. Maybe unjustified, but I knew what kind of chaos I might be letting loose. He rolls another natural 20. The table erupts as I describe how the Countess, absolutely flattened by his suave charisma, agrees to the marriage on the spot. The marriage happens. The player becomes a count. Drinks are had and merriment occurs. The Minotaur Barbarian can't keep himself in check among humans, elves, and the like. He is smashing plates on accident, breaking wind, engaging in coarse discussion, and doesn't understand the concept of a waltz. There is a note I need to make about this Minotaur. His intelligence score was around 6. 5 is the minimum for sentience as we know it. He wasn't bright. By the player's own urging, he mandated will saves to not become distracted by shiny objects or fly into a rage at the slightest perceived insult. The Minotaur is escorted out by the newly appointed Count and Countess. Instead of sending him out completely, they send him to the stables. He finds some cows on the stables and tries to hit on them. He has horns. They have horns. Love is in the air. He is very stupid. Why not? Well, the animals do not understand concepts like Minotaur love and ignore him. The player rolls 1 as his customary am I that stupid rolls and finds he is that stupid. He flies into a depressed rage and strikes one of the cows. However, the player did not anticipate how little HP a cow has and caves in its head in a single strike. This barbarian had the cleave feat, something he has used with gusto all campaign long. 3.5e rules. When you kill an enemy with an attack, you may deliver an additional attack to any target within your attack range. The player attempts another will save to rein in his emotions. He fails miserably. In his grief and rage, he falls back on old habits and cleaves a blow to another nearby cow, killing it instantly. The resulting havoc and fear from the rest of the cows draws the guards. The Count's first actions in his new authority is sending his friend to jail for animal cruelty. He bailed him out the next day. During this entire sequence, I merely narrated the events as they happened and did not meddle with events or their roles. This situation played out as D&D should be, by and for the players. It was magical and gut-wrenchingly hilarious. TLDR. By the will of the dice gods alone, a player unwittingly marries a countess, becomes count. His buddy gets arrested for murdering a bunch of bovines. Zero dungeon master intervention involved. This was a large online campaign with hundreds of players and plots working simultaneously. I played a human supremacist at the height of a major uprising of freedom fighters and elven supremacists. Having worked my way to the top of the military chain of command, I used my authority to push around elves as much as possible. One of the members of government, who happened to be an elf, decided she would attempt to do something about it, knowing full well her intentions. Due to her constant prodding and attempts at undermining my authority, a buddy and I began scheming. Our intent wasn't actually to get rid of her. Our intent was to strike a decisive blow against the insurrectionists by luring them out of hiding. She just happened to provide the perfect excuse. The plan was fairly detailed and required a lot of preparation. The idea was that in order to lure out the enemy, we had to kill the elf, but we couldn't just execute her. We needed to make a real show of it. So we began openly building a legal case against her by collecting absolutely damning evidence. We dragged people in, threatened to flail loved ones for information, which made the dungeon masters freak out, and dungeon master chat made bribes. The works. Then we started making alliances with all sorts of factions throughout the city so that we would have arms men to strike when the moment was right. We had mercenaries everywhere who smelled the alluring scent of dungeon master loot. As we got those two aspects ready, we intentionally leaked some seemingly vital information that was really not that important. We told one of her friends in confidence that she was being brought up on charges of treason for talking with the enemy. Nothing substantial. Nothing that would hold up in court. Then the day came. I summoned her to my barrack under the pretext of putting a criminal on trial. She, being an officer of the court, arrived to conduct the trial. When she arrived and she asked where the defendant was, I told her it was her. We put her in the cells for a couple of days while her friends rallied allies and built a defense around the false charges. On the day of the trial, my friend and I mustered our troops in the city square and then presented our case. Absolutely none of the charges we presented were covered by the defense. They just stood there silently trying to figure out how to salvage the mess they were in. The plan was working perfectly. We were going to get our guilty verdict, and she would be executed in the square. As we led her to the executioner's block, as it's pretty obvious we won, her allies sprang into action to free her. And that's when my boys did the same and started carving up rebels. We captured several revolutionary leaders that day and all of them were put to the sword. The aftermath was glorious. I had not only driven out all the rebels but had solidified myself as a military dictator. Even the directorate, which was officially above my station, were too afraid to attempt to depose me. The story of how I killed my first player is always a fun one. So, we have a friend who wants to play a cat person furry folk. Whatever, that's fine by me. Well, one of the stats in DnD is wisdom, and my player rolls a 6. 10 is average. So, he decides his character is really like an actual cat, curious, kinda dumb, and fucks with everything it comes across. This curiosity led him to willingly seek out and ingest a dead rat that had just poisoned the cleric, which then poisoned the cat during a long seafaring journey, which nearly killed him, a rotting fish, and flakes of undead flesh. Long story. None these were the culprits of his death, however. His downfall was a clear vial of liquid found in an old chest inside an ogre's den. I was in the middle of describing the vial when he stopped me dead by saying, "I eat it." I sat in stunned silence for a while. The flask was filled with a magical oil meant to temper weapons with the flame enchantment. I had him roll a fortitude save. He fails with a 2. I had him roll a will save. He fails with a 6. I then sighed, broke character, and told him he enchanted himself. Just like the liquid required, if he was lit on fire at any point, he would never go out. However, his cat was none the wiser, since there was no real effect on his body and his cat wasn't smart enough to search for one. He went on thinking it was gross ass water. Side note, if you've never played D&D, a rule is that you cannot metagame. Metagaming is when you act on something you know that your character does not know. So, you may know trolls are weak to fire, but your idiot barbarian character probably wouldn't, so you wouldn't go out of your way to use fire. So, what this means is that his cat not only wasn't aware of how he could die at the wrong moment, his cat also didn't even know something was wrong to get it removed in the first place. The cat then proceeded to die not because of the enchantment, but because he face rushed the ogre. He was later resurrected via demon summoning, but they used his old body, so his character was still enchanted with fire. His next death came the very same session, where he was defending a boat while it was trying to sail away. He unluckily decided to charge the only enemy character with a firebomb. The cat exploded in an enemy boat sinking inferno, killing half a dozen thieves, which allowed his allies to just barely escape alive. Eris the Shadow Sorcerer was my first player death as a dungeon master, and I still miss that crazy cat. He always kept me on my toes. Out of all the zany, crazy, half-baked ideas my players sometime will come up with, I'm glad he was the one to break my murder cherry.